not seen Millionaire Made, it's a show where we believe that you can become a millionaire in all 6 aspects of health. We share tips to improve your physical health, your mental health, your social health, spiritual health, financial health, and today we're going to focus on your intellectual health. Our topic is books, how to improve your intellectual health with books. If you've never seen Millionaires Are Made, this is the show built on the fundamental belief that every person you meet knows something that you don't, and there's something to be learned from everyone in this big, beautiful world. In the spirit of authenticity, we don't talk about our tips or advice in the green room backstage. We let all our guests talk naturally from their own life journeys. So we'll see what kind of tips we get today on how to improve your intellectual health with books. Audience, this is an interactive show. Please feel free to comment, ask questions, shout out, do whatever you want. We do monitor our chat and we will ask the questions live. We also want to give a quick shout out to some of our followers on Facebook, Bernadette George, Instagram, Rhino Hurst, TikTok, Greg Baird, and YouTube, John Francis Boyle. Thank you so much for following. If you want to be shouted out on our next show, just go follow us on our socials. If you want to be a guest on our show, we'd love to have you. We believe everyone has something to share. We're dropping the link right now. You can sign up and give out your expertise. And if you are going through something in life, maybe you're not fit enough, which is very common for the beginning of the year, or maybe you feel like you're not social enough, you need better friends, whatever it is, let us know your topic. We will go out and find 3 awesome guests. We'll give you 3 pieces of advice and do an entire episode just for you to help you get through that tough time in life. If you love what we do, collecting and giving out free information on how to grow, please don't forget to like, comment, share, send stars, subscribe, or whatever it is on whatever medium you are. We highly appreciate it. Without further ado, now it's our time to announce our sponsors. Our first sponsor today is Samir Dasani, who's also on this episode, certified health and nutrition coach specializing in the prevention and reversal of chronic and autoimmune diseases. He is crazy good with all sorts of diseases people think are uncurable or can't be treated, and they just deal with it. And then Samir goes in and helps them live their life a lot better. He's had years of declining health, and then he discovered the healing power of traditional eating practices, which are different than a lot of people think. It transformed his life and his family's well-being. Now he helps a lot of clients reverse their autoimmune conditions naturally without medications, which is huge. He's pursuing his PhD in anthropology right now in South Africa and integrates all his academia with his coaching to offer a holistic approach to health. Go check out Samir now. He's pretty awesome. Next sponsor for this episode, thank you so much, Sarah Jones, who used to be buried in debt in a failing marriage and was making more money than ever before, but happiness wasn't there, and she knew that she needed a better way. She followed one of the big name programs for getting out of debt, but it just resulted in more shame, more debt, and living a life that felt awful. So she set out to find a way through the money mess, restore her marriage, and use the money they're making to work for them and not against them. And now she goes and she's a financial coach. She travels the world in an RV with her husband and teaches people how to build healthy financial foundations. She's pretty awesome. Go check her out. Link being dropped right now. Craig Sakovsky is an awesome coach, exemplifies resilience and transformation. He's a 9/11 World Trade Center volunteer and a lung cancer survivor. He overcame childhood trauma, addiction, and adversity to become a certified Les Brown Power Voice speaker, real estate investor, and mentor. Craig is pretty awesome and challenges a lot of societal norms and encourages self-discovery, authenticity, and personal growth. Go check him out. And our final sponsor for this episode, thank you so much, is Jesse Lewis, who is always brings unforgettable entertainment, is one great way to put it, to your event with Jesse Lewis. He's a comedian and hypnotist. He's hilarious, throwing interactive shows guaranteed to amaze and engage your guests. Visit him now, check him out, and book him for your next event. Woo! All right, the time has come. Let's bring out our first guest. Our first guest is Brian. Brian, who are you?
Wow, that's a large question. Well, I'll tell you what I do in the world. I help people write their books. I'm a ghostwriter and book writing coach. I also publish a monthly digital magazine called Ultimate Achievers Magazine. And I also host a weekly internet radio show called Success Profiles Radio. And that show is 13 years old right now. So I have a chance to talk to a lot of really amazing and awesome people. Some of the people I've had on my show include Kevin Harrington, Sharon Lecter, Laura Langmeyer, Dr. Dennis Waitley, John Assaraf, Dr. Joe Vitale. I had Jeff Timmons from 98 Degrees on one week. That was awesome. Jonathan Horton, who competed in the Olympics for the United States in gymnastics a couple times, won a silver medal in 2008 in Beijing. He's been on my show a couple times. I just get to talk to a lot of really fascinating people, and I love my life and wouldn't trade it for anything right now.
I love it. That sounds amazing, Brian. And I know that you have a lot to do with books, so this is a perfect question for you. If I wanted to improve my intellectual health with books, what tiny piece of advice would you give me?
Well, read. That's probably the first thing I would say. But a lot of people don't like to read anymore. I embraced Audible about a year and a half ago, and my goal to start my day is to listen to a book on Audible for 30 minutes every single day, and sometimes it's more. In fact, I got my 2024 Audible stats yesterday. I think I had 287 the time on Audible. That's almost an hour a day. That's 45 minutes a day. And I was in 81 different titles. So I take a lot of really great notes. And so reading and listening is one thing, but taking notes and deciding to apply what you're learning is really the critical piece, because what I've done is, as a writer, if I've taken really great notes on something that I've read or listened to, I have a chance to spin it in my own way and create content for my show or my magazine. In fact, I've repurposed some of that into the feature article for this month's Ultimate Achievers magazine that's coming out in the next few days. So in fact, that article is going to be called The Top 3 Mindset Books You Need to Read in 2025.
What are they?
Number 1, Bob Proctor, You Were Born Rich, the live seminar. Number 2, Jack Canfield's 30-Day Guide to the Law of Attraction. And number 3, T. Harv Eker's Secrets of the Millionaire Mind in Turbulent Times. That's a live seminar also.
Cool. All right. I like it. Yeah. Brian, where on your life journey did you learn this tip? Tell us a little bit more of your past. Tell us more about how you got to be where the hell you are right now.
Right. Well, after I finished my bachelor's degree in communication at Iowa State, I ended up going to Nebraska for graduate school. And partway through the program, I changed to adult education, which I enjoyed so much better. But after spending a year and a half in the work world selling insurance and not particularly enjoying a lot of it, I went back to school to finish my degree. And just reading textbooks all the time and writing papers, I got really tired of reading because I had to. I decided to start reading because I wanted to. And so I discovered personal development. And so I decided that was what I was going to start reading, was personal development stuff. In fact, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz was the first personal development book that I really started diving into. And it really opened my mind, and decided that's the kind of stuff that I want to read and eventually write someday. And so here I am.
I love it. And I'm very similar with what you said earlier about reading and recreating your content. The more I read, the more you can take these ideas, tie them together, and almost all my content's just from stuff I read. So that's pretty cool.
Yep.
Awesome, Brian. We'll move on to our next guest. Thank you so much. The always eccentric Jesse Lewis.
Cheers, Austin. Cheers.
Jesse, who are you?
I'm a comedy hypnotist. I perform across Western Canada, and I'm going to be boring for you today. We'll be bored the whole time.
All right. A boring comedian hypnotist. Jesse, if I wanted to improve my intellectual health with books, not necessarily reading, with books, what tiny tip would you give me?
Pick one up. That's the tiniest tip I have, Austin. The truth is that most people have this in front of them all the time. In fact, I have it right now. I should go scrolling through my TikTok and my Facebook and have the blue light on my face and have absolutely no focus whatsoever. You don't get that from this. You get that from a book, because you actually have to sit there and physically read what's in front of you instead of being distracted all the time by 14 other things, cat videos and half-naked women and everything else on your phone. Instead, you have a book in front of you and you have to read. Well, it's not newsworthy because it's not newsworthy. Anyway, when you have that physical book, there's that it's weird. But if you get a good old book, there's that smell that comes with it too. And it takes you to a completely different place in your mind than seeing the visuals on a phone. So the tip is simply pick one up and actually read the bloody thing. Sounds weird.
Pick it up, and I'm a big fan. I'm gonna go against what Brian said, but I hate audiobooks. I can't. I think that
there is nothing wrong with audiobooks, Austin. For instance,
what?
Audiobooks are great. I do 16-hour drives sometimes to shows way far north, ice road truckers territory, that type of thing. I drive up to those communities, I'll do a show, and on the way there, instead of listening to the latest pop music, I'm listening to an audiobook. So I'm actually learning something.
On this.
Well, every once in a while I got to shake it off. But sorry. But it does allow me to actually learn something, and I'm not wasting my time just listening to lyrics that mean nothing to me. Or I'm not a music guy, so don't have me on the music podcast. But really, the books are where it's at to actually learn something.
All right. Well, Jesse, where on your life journey? Where on your life journey did you learn this tip?
Well, believe it or not, my entire hypnosis career started with a book. You see, what happened is I was working 400 hours a month, really, really stressed out. I read a book on how to do stage hypnosis, and from that book, it gave me enough courage. I had the grapefruits to go out and book a bar show. 6 months later, I quit that job, and I started a career. And I've been doing it for 20 years because I read a damn book. It really is. It can be the gateway to your entire life because there's so much imagination. There is so much information that is within a book that you can go back to again and again and again. And it's not a distracted information. It's focused information. So it really does help. And that's where I learned it. Did we lose your audio, so Austin? Okay.
A book is what literally... No, it's just fascinating that you read one book, took action, and now your entire life and career is basically based off of that book.
If you think about it, if you go back in time 40 years, most people's lives and careers are based off of a book that they read in high school or they read as an adult, and then they chose to go down that path.
I would say I've read some really good books. I don't have one that pops out. But anyways, pick it up. Tip, pick it up. Read a book. All right. Jesse, let's move on to our next guest. You got one last thought? Say it.
That really is the core of it. It's if you don't take action, you're not going to learn anything. So take some damn action, pick up a book.
And even just reading. I mean, one of the fastest ways to learn is to have somebody who's an expert and has done it 1,000 times more than you tell you how it's done. And people get that wrong so many times. And sometimes you have to pay. I mean, a book, $14 to get someone's all their knowledge is probably the best value you can get in this world. I mean, if you get one-on-one coaching with an expert, it's going to be $10,000 for an hour with any of the big gurus, So it's kind of like, wow, $14 and I learn everything? Whew.
The thing is, you can go back to a book again and again and again and learn it again and again and again until it's in your head. Whereas if you hire somebody, you get them once and then you're done. Or if you're mentorship, you have them long term. But it's mostly in the book.
That's very true. Very good point, Jesse. Thank you so much. We are going to bring out Samir next. Samir, who are you?
Hey, Austin, your viewers know who I am by now, but my name is Samir Dasani. I'm a health coach. I'm a PhD in anthropology, or just about to be one soon, I hope. I'm also the author of this fine book here, The Health Dialectic, Modernity Makes Us Sick and How Ancestral Living Can Heal. That's me.
Samir, I don't even think I knew you had written a book, so it's now on my list to go buy.
I will send you the link, man. In fact, I'll send you a copy if you send me an address.
Okay, cool. I just put it on my to-do list tab, so it's probably number 101 things to do in the next month. But anyway, Samir, if I wanted to improve my intellectual health with books, what tiny piece of advice would you give me?
Just building, I agree with both of the pieces of advice that have come so far, but just building on that, how about you pick up a book that you kind of don't have a good reaction to? like something that's kind of making you a little bit uncomfortable. And how about you pick it up and you look at it, you thumb through it, and you think, I really don't agree with this. Why don't you pick up that book and read it? Because I think you're going to learn from it.
Interesting. Do you have an example of when that happened to you?
Yeah, I have well, not yeah, me too. But the story I was going to tell, because I think your next question is when did you learn this tip?
Do you want me to
Um,
ask it now?
you can ask it now.
Where on your life journey did you learn this advice?
Yeah, so I was a smartass kid in university, and I picked up a book by a guy called Noam Chomsky, and I gave it to my dad for his birthday. And I thought it was just like, it was like, I think the name of it was like What Uncle Sam Really Wants. Like it was like pretty, I thought it was pretty bland and like on US politics and stuff. I hadn't read it myself. And my dad, I didn't know any of this when I gave him the book, but my dad was a huge fan of Ayn Rand, who's a sort of right wing, extremely right wing, sort of conservative, almost, what's the word, libertarian kind of thinker. And Chomsky is coming from the other side, from the sort of anarcho-communist kind of side. And I made the mistake. I don't know if it was a mistake, but I asked my dad what he thought of the book, and he was like, at first he didn't want to answer, and then he was like, these leftists, these commies are full of shit. Like that was like his, because I forced him to answer, and I was like, oh shit, my dad hates that book. Let me go read it and really understand it. And in some ways, picking up that book and going to listen to Chomsky's lectures when I was at McGill in the '90s, and doing all that kind of human rights related work that we've talked about on previous podcasts, that was sort of how that, again, that's how my career began. My career began with challenging my dad and then myself, because I didn't agree with the book either when I read it. I had to look up all the footnotes and kind of figure out what I thought about these things, because it was so contrary to what I was hearing on the news. So it was just that moment where this book is telling me stuff. It's like the entire world is telling me X. This book is telling me not X. Let me figure
I
out who's
feel
right and
that's
who's wrong.
you nowadays, Samir.
Yeah, totally. I mean, like if you look at my story, because I've been able to challenge, I was a vegan in my 20s too, right? And to be able to challenge some of that and say, actually veganism made me very sick. It made my family very sick. And now that we have adopted a more carnivore, sort of meat-based, low-carb lifestyle, we have healed. You need to have a certain amount of, oh shit, everything I've learned may be wrong. So let me put that aside and let me actually see, maybe this works. Let me actually look into the history of human evolution. So I think you're right. I think that skill is kind of part of what makes me who I am, is the ability to just take a step back and say, okay, the entire world believes vegetables are good for you. But what if that is wrong? Maybe it's right, but
Whoa.
can we prove that it's right? And if we can't, then what the fuck does that mean? Like, these are questions that I think we all need to be answering, because to be honest, we were talking about this a little offline before you joined us. I don't think people are reading enough books these days. And as a result, I think people it's like sheep. You can just lead them wherever the fuck you want. Well, if you know what you're doing, if you're the person who's read a lot of books and you want to give people the information that will lead them to certain conclusions and lead them to follow you, you can do that. And I feel that we're living in an era where private enterprise and governments and so on, they can mislead people really easily. And if we were smarter, if we were more educated, if we read more books, I don't think we'd be that easy to fool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny you added that. As a mathematical economist, I do a lot of data points and data entries, and I've always told people that pretty much any data set, I can make it say whatever you want.
100%, man, 100%. And in my logic class, I mean, we did a proof. So I was a sort of an advanced philosophy student. That was one of my first undergrad degrees, right? And I could write a proof. Like I literally wrote out this proof that it makes more sense to leave this building from the third floor than from the front door. I could make that make logical sense, but please don't leave this building from the third floor. You're gonna hurt yourself, right? Obviously. So we need some critical thinking.
Yeah, and it's hard to hopefully all the fake news / misleading stuff is making people wake up to really like analyze it. So, I mean, any data set, you can take one set of data and I can make it say this, and then someone else can make it say that. And what is truth? How do you find truth if the data?
Unfortunately, Austin, most people don't do that. Most people have a bias and they go and they find the evidence. This is why I want people to pick up books that challenge them, because most people will only read the books that hit their confirmation bias, that tell them what they want to hear. Like if you're an economist, like if you're a Keynesian economist versus if you're a Milton Friedman economist, like those are two different kinds of people. But the Keynesians only read the Keynesians and the Friedmanites only read the Friedman stuff. It's like, dude, you got to read the other perspective to know what the fuck's going on. Otherwise, you have no clue. You're just in a bubble, right? Sorry, that's a bit of an abstract commentary for those who aren't.
No, it's 100% true. I mean, then you got to throw Marx in there too, and you know, there's
For sure.
a few other ones you really gotta read. And I mean, at this point, no economy has ever been 100% perfect, and perhaps maybe never will. And so, yeah, it's fascinating to think about stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep down the economics rabbit hole, but the point is not which is right and wrong. The point is, what are the perspectives that each is advancing? Can you put yourself outside your bias? Can you understand what that person who honestly believes something that you don't believe, but can you put yourself in their shoes and understand why they believe those things? Because if you can do that, then I think you're going to be able to engage in much more rational discussions. And maybe you won't convince, if you meet someone like that in real life, maybe you won't convince them that you're right, but you'll be able to have more sympathy, more empathy for their point of view and understand that maybe there is something. I mean, I was reading a book. This is kind of a weird example, but it was a book on indigenous knowledge systems, which is really my academic work. And this guy was talking about, like, he was thinking about the people who are the most wrong in the whole planet. So I don't know what you think of flat earthers, but most of us think that they're like no clue, like know what's going on. But this guy was like, no, you have to find, everyone has a truth, right? So he was like, okay, so I did more research. I found out that the Earth isn't 100% spherical. Because the Earth is rotating at such a fast speed, it's like a ball that's getting squished, and eventually it will get squished enough that actually all that will be left will be a flat Earth, right? So it's an interesting. I'm not saying I agree with that perspective. The book is by, I'm forgetting the name. The book is called Sand Talk. Absolutely recommended to go and read it. That's a book that's going to challenge 100% of the people listening to this
Sand
podcast.
Talk?
Sand Talk, 2 words. Sand, like sand on the beach, and
Okay.
talk. And
Like
so,
Tyson Yunkaporta?
100%. That is a freaking brilliant book. That is one of the most brilliant books I've read. Very readable, but very, very challenging, because there's stuff in there that no science-minded person will be able to agree with, right? But it's challenging because it's like, okay, these were the indigenous Australian ways of thinking, and what does that teach us about ourselves? And this is by someone who is an indigenous Australian, but also got a PhD in the Western Colonial Academic University. So him trying to put those two worlds together is super fascinating stuff. Now, again, do I agree with everything in there? Absolutely not. But I'm recommending it because it's so challenging and it's so interesting.
I love it. Another book on that note I'll recommend is called Liminal Thinking by Dave Gray. And it kind of starts with the whole theory of you have 3 blind men in a room. They put in an elephant. One guy's holding the leg, and he goes, "It's a tree." And the other guy holds the tail, and he's like, "This is a rope. What are you talking about?" And the third guy's holding, the trunk or whatever. And they're all arguing, and they're all right in their own perspectives because that's all they have. But none of them are actually right because all their realities are different. And so being able to learn and being able to ask the right questions to learn what someone else is experiencing in order to get their perspective is a huge talent if you can figure that out.
Yeah, man, 100%.
All right, Samir, that was a great talk. We're bringing everyone else out. Let's get going here. Audience, this is a great time to ask any questions you might have for Brian, Samir, or the always eccentric Jesse Lewis. Great. It's a great point of wisdom for someone to challenge their beliefs. So let's just start with that right now. What a great little comment. Thank you, Tanya. Any feedback or responses to that for you guys?
I wasn't expecting to be mind screwed today, but why not? We're enjoying it.
Flat Earth for you?
No. Well, yes. It's weird because it ties into what I do, right? My job is literally manipulating people to believe a certain thing while on stage. And because of that, I see it all the time in everything, and I see it being used in ways that you might not expect. For instance, in politics, in advertising, and stuff like that. And you do have to find the other perspective, because that's the only way that you actually de-hypnotize yourself, if that makes any sense, because hypnosis is everything that goes on within person, at least from my perspective. And yeah, it's kind of a mind F word, to be honest.
Hey, we're allowed to say the F word on the show, man.
I said too much last time.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's go back then. Let's start with Brian. Can you quickly refresh what your tip was for us?
When you read, take notes if you're reading something that you wish to apply to your life or your business, and then implement it. I think a lot of people will just read and listen. I mean, like, for example, there are books like autobiographies. I'm listening to a Michael Jordan biography right now.
Yeah.
Now that's a book where I'm not going to take a lot of notes, but it's something that I'm just listening to absorb, and so I can do other things, whether it's walking or something that's a little administrative in my business. But if I'm listening to something like the 3 books I mentioned earlier, where I know I'm going to get a lot out of it, then I will make sure that I'm in a place where I can take notes so that I can figure out how I'm going to use it. So, yeah, take notes if it's something that you want to apply to your life, and then go do it. Pick one thing and apply it. And I think that's the best way you can make the best use of your time. I think all
And
books
I have
have
a problem with
value.
that because I have a problem with that because I can really only read when I have my laptop open and ready to take notes because I have a spicy brain. So right now, if something doesn't go right, sometimes it throws out my whole thing. So I haven't read in
Yeah.
like 2 weeks because I read this book that was so interesting and I didn't have my laptop. And I was like, nope, we got to close it and wait till
Yeah.
I'm ready to take notes. And now I'm like sitting there knowing it's a lot more work than just reading. So kind of
Yeah.
annoying, but I
And
agree
to
with that.
answer
Go
the
ahead.
question, that just came up, do you think only self-help books are worthwhile, or all
We
books?
haven't gotten there yet, Brian. All right, let's go there.
Well, I see it there. So anyway, no, I mean, I
Go
happen to
ahead.
like
Go ahead.
reading stuff that will improve my life or my business. Like I just mentioned, I'm listening to a biography, a Michael Jordan biography. So all books do have value. It just depends on your reason for wanting to read. Are you reading to learn? Are you reading to be entertained? I went through a phase where I read Stephen King a lot, and my goodness, he has a really, really creative set of methods to kill his characters off. I marvel at that. You know, there's one story where he had a character kill off another character using a letter opener and stabbing someone in the back of the neck with that. I thought, that's interesting. I never would have thought of doing that. But you can get value whatever it is that you want to read or listen to. I just have my set of genres that I like to listen to, and so that's where I live.
I'm gonna pipe in real quick on that too. So I read a lot of like I guess self-help theory, theoretical stuff, real life stuff. But I mean, don't forget that writing is an art, and creating, and I mean, just think of like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. They give you value, whether it's entertainment or whether it's still a creative and interesting way to view the world. There's still themes in it that are real world. Of course, abracadabra is not real, in case you were curious and you were watching the show to find that out. But there's still a lot of themes in books. Even in fantasy books that you can find that have real world applications, and it's someone's mind. It's creative, it's creativity, it's art. Okay, someone take over now.
The beauty of the books, you're supposed to ask me a question, Austin. My tip was to just pick one up. I want to answer this question specifically. It's not just self-help books. We'll go back to World War II and what was done in World War II. You read books from that time, you understand the political situation that was going on. You understand how the Nazi Party literally hypnotized the masses, and you can then prevent that from happening again if you actually follow the lessons that are within the books. So every book can have value. It just depends on what you're gleaning from that book specifically. Self-help books might actually be the worst ones of the bunch to actually not have any value whatsoever. Here's the gist of every self-help book ever. Serve others, do shit that you want to do. There you go. If you do the shit you want to do, you've been helped. Done. So that's kind of mean, but take action. If you sit on your ass and don't do anything, you can't expect any results. Other than that, let's go back to
All right. We have a new question that we'll answer right now. Why do I have a feeling Samir reads manga?
Nah, not me, dudes. Not me.
Oh!
You're thinking of my daughter. My daughter reads manga.
Okay.
But, no, I mean, I used to read, like graphic novels and stuff, like what was it, Watchmen and stuff like that. But that's a long time ago. No, so in terms of fiction, there's a Canadian author who I really love. Since we have a Canadian on the show, maybe I'll talk about him. I don't know if you've come across this guy, Guy Gabriel Kay. Has anyone come across the name? He writes a genre called historical fiction, historical fantasy, something like this. And he takes sort of real life events and he puts like some little bits of magic in there. And it's really fascinating. For me, it's fascinating to read the books because he's such a brilliant writer. This guy's just a fantastic writer. But then you go back, he's written a 3-part trilogy, for example, on the building and the fall of Constantinople, called Sailing to Sarantium. So he's calling Constantinople Sarantium instead of Byzantium, basically. And so you read those 3 novels, and then you go and you look up the history, and you find out, oh shit, man, this was actually this. Some of this happened. Some of it, obviously, when he's talking about magic fires and dolphins that can be tamed and so on, that's fantastical stuff. But there is reference to the guy who built what's called the Hagia Sophia, or the Hagia Sophia, some people called, the Emperor Justinian, and so on. And there's really detailed references to the kind of cuisine that was there, and the kind of cooking that was done, and the kind of mosaics that were done, mosaic art, and so on. So that's someone who's done, like, when he writes one of those books, he does like 5 years of research to write one of those books, historical research.
Wow, that's cool.
And then he writes the book, but he writes it in his own. He liberates himself from writing nonfiction by saying, no, this is actually fiction. So he doesn't, the things that he can't know, like he can't know what the Emperor Justinian was thinking, but he can put those thoughts in there because he makes it sort of fantasy and fiction and so on. So I think there's a lot of people writing stuff these days that are really pushing boundaries in really creative dimensions. And because there's so many of them, it's hard to know what to read and it's hard to really find all this stuff. But yeah, I mean, both fiction and nonfiction, there's so much good stuff out there. So get out there and read something.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to how the show, like shows of the past, like the show Vikings, they say, okay, we know that these events happen, but they only know 1 event or 2 events a year because the records just aren't there. So they're like, we know this event happened at this day, and 6 months later this happened. And then they're like, we just make up random drama in between to see how to connect them, which is, kind of cool and creative as long as you know it's not real. But let's take a minute or two. We're getting towards the end here. So we talked a lot about reading books, intellectual health books, and reading. What about writing your own book? And I'm going to start with Brian because that's your favorite forte. How do you improve your intellectual health by writing a book?
Well, I think, honestly, you get the best ideas for writing by reading first. In fact, I had a coach one time where I confided in him that I felt completely empty. I had no idea what to write about. He says, "You're not reading enough." I said, "Well, I'm reading the things that I'm writing for my clients' book." He said, "That doesn't count. You need to read stuff that other people have written. You'll get ideas from there and you can put your own spin on it and go from there." So I think if you want to do any level of writing, I think you really should be reading and getting input from the world around you, whether that comes from books you've read, whether that comes from your own life experiences. I mean, when my dad passed almost 4 years ago, I decided that I was going to write a book to honor his memory. And I ended up doing that about, 9 months later, 6 to 9 months later. So writing from your own experience is also something you can do. But I do think that journaling is a great place to start. If you aren't sure what to write about, just journal every day and see what comes up. And if you find yourself journaling about the same ideas over and over again, then maybe that's something you need to write about. So writing a book is certainly a good idea if you want to share your legacy or impact the world or teach someone something, whether you choose to profit from it or not. Sometimes just the act of having done it is enough.
Awesome. I love it. We're going to do one last question and then wrap this up. Brennis just found us and he says, "I'd like to ask everyone about your favorite book, just one, and he'll try to read them this year for sure."
That's a tough one. I mean, I've already given an author, so I can go ahead and name. Guy Gabriel Kay has a couple of series that are awesome. The one that was really good was the Chinese one. The sequel is called River of Stars, and that's a good one to start with too. So check it out. That's about ancient China during the Han Dynasty, I want to say. Really, really super cool historical fiction stuff, and it's got ninjas and like cool warrior monks in there and stuff like that. So, River of Stars by Guy Gabriel Kay.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna write these down too. River of Stars, Guy Gabriel Kay. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna post the links to it too, so we all have them. Jesse, you want to go next?
Oh, this is bad because it gets you hooked, but I read some trash fiction. so you get sucked in. R.A. Salvatore is not trash fiction, but he has He's within a group of books from the Forgotten Realms, and it's basically D&D but in book form. And there's a 300 book series, and if you choose the R.A. Salvatore ones first,
300 book series, cheater.
I think it's at like 310, and I've read most of them. But the thing about his books is that he brings you into the lore and he teaches you about the world and stuff in a way that fit me when I was 14 years old. And I go back to those books every 4 or 5 years, and I will read 30, 40 books in the series again and again and again. I do have a question for Samir. I'll let Brian answer first. But Samir, do you find that when people are reading this historical stuff that it hurts what you do as an anthropologist? Does it spread misinformation sometimes? And I'll let Brian go first with his book recommendation. I'm sorry for the weird question at the end.
One of the books I referenced earlier, You Were Born Rich, Bob Proctor. I think it's terrific.
Okay.
Great stuff. Should I have a go? So for me, as long as things are done, I think there's two ways to do things. I think you can do things lazily, and you can do things diligently. And there are certain writers. I'm forgetting his name. He's a person of Indian origin from the Caribbean. His name might be Dinesh D'Souza. No, it's someone else. It's he's a very, very brilliant writer, and he writes about travel, right? But we know, and because he's done interviews, we know that he like travels to Hong Kong and writes the damn book from his hotel room. He doesn't leave his hotel room. He just happens to be in Hong Kong and writes a book about Hong Kong from his hotel room. And because he's such a brilliant writer, people buy his stuff, and he's won prizes. I'm forgetting his name. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. Very, very, very well-known writer. So to me, that is just lazy writing, and that can be very misleading because people go to Hong Kong and they want to relive what he's done, but he didn't do anything. He just sat at the damn out of his hotel window and made stuff up, which is fine. But then don't say that you have anything to do with the real world, right? So the contrast would be, again, Gabriel Kay, like that dude, again, before he does anything, he goes to the place. He wrote a book about pirates on the Aegean coast of what is today, I want to say Bosnia, but somewhere around there. I'm forgetting the exact city state. And the reason he wrote that book was he showed up and someone in the taxi, his taxi driver was like, dude, I know you, I know your work, I know what you do. I have to take you to these historical sites because they're going to be so cool that you're going to want to write a book around it about these pirates. Pirates who were resisting the Ottoman Empire at the time when the Ottoman Empire was very strong, et cetera, et cetera. And so he wrote that book, and he wrote it from two different points of view. So it was about the Ottomans, it was about the Turks. So he couldn't just write it from the Christian perspective. He had to spend time in Turkey too, right? So, people who do that kind of research, even if what they say is not historically accurate, you can see the thinking, and it encourages people to get deeper into their own research. So I think if you're a lazy writer, then yeah, it's not a great. The guy I'm thinking of is from Trinidad, and someone will remind me of his name, or maybe I'll look it up right now. He's a very, very famous writer. That guy is what I would call a lazy writer. The other one is people who will actually do it with a bit of. You have to work. If you want to do something that is reflective of society, you got to do the work. It's not enough to have talent, in my opinion. You have to actually have some effort, do some effort.
It's true. All right, guys, it's time to wrap this up, and our last task is to come up with a daily challenge. We need to.
The guy I was thinking of is V.S. Naipaul.
Yes, Sniper. All right, we have to come up with a task or series of tasks that takes less than 5 minutes a day, costs $0, and is available to anyone in the world from Trinidad to Bosnia. What do you guys suggest?
Most places have a library. That's free. Most.
So 5 minutes every day, do what? Go to the library?
That's the free option. I don't know what past that, but
yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think of what to say other than read a book for 5 minutes a day, because that's the obvious thing to say, right? So I think that's okay. I think what we can add to that is Brian's tip around maybe take some notes around it too. So maybe for 3 minutes do the reading, and for 2 minutes maybe some reflection, some journaling. What did you learn from this? If we're trying to
I
keep
think
it
your
under
tip
5
that you had before is good too. Find something that you're not necessarily aligned with and read something you're not aligned with at the same time.
These are all great ideas. I'm just trying to think of how to make it super accessible. I think the idea of finding a book at a library, reading it 5 minutes a day, and maybe journaling for 5 minutes. Can we make it 10 minutes, Austin? Because that would
No.
actually be more useful. No, you can't. so 2.5 minutes reading, 2.5 minutes journaling, or whatever it is.
What about we make it something different than just reading? Because, if someone doesn't like it, they're not going to do it, yada, yada. What about maybe researching a genre and what it's about, or maybe learning about a new author, or following something along those lines of even pre-reading? Somebody that doesn't like reading, or there's a lot of people out there that hate it. Maybe it's more about doing research about what genre you might be interested in, what genres exist. Or maybe you find one of your passions and see someone that's written about it. Find a new author. If you love D&D, finding an author. I mean, some people may not. I didn't realize there's 300 books on D&D. Did you say D&D?
Dude, that's nothing. There are thousands. There's the Forgotten
I didn't know
Realms.
that. So that's something new. So maybe it's more of a, find a new So everyone should have at least 7 passions for the next week. So find a passion and find maybe a genre or an author that fits that. And then maybe you just read a little excerpt, or maybe you read the back title or something like that, and find a book that you may want to read in the future.
Yeah.
I have a friendly amendment that would make that a little bit more accessible. Which is, because everyone's consuming media these days. So find a book that's linked to something that you already like, and find a way to get that book into your life.
Yeah. And if you have absolutely no idea what book you should read next, post on social. I have an Audible credit to spend. What should I get?
Ooh,
what do you think I
great.
should read next?
Yeah.
That's another great idea.
I've done that several times, and I always get engagement. Or if you want to phrase the question differently, I'm going on an airplane. I'm flying to wherever, and I'm going to be on the plane for a couple hours. What should I read while I'm in the air?
100%.
I get lots of suggestions, and some of my friends. I have there was a kid I used to babysit who now works in the Yale library system, and so he always has suggestions that are so outside the realm of what I normally read. He's very interested in African studies, actually. So he'll always suggest stuff that I've never heard of. And it's just interesting just to see what other people like to read and where their heads are. And it's like, and there are several suggestions that I've actually taken up. In fact, I had a conversation with somebody a couple days ago, and he said, you need to read such and such a book. I bought it on Audible and I started it yesterday.
Nice. Very good. All right. So I've got for our daily challenge, think about a passion that you have, and, research a genre or an author that fits it or goes against it. Ask your friends. I just put ask your friends because you may not want to put on socials. I don't know. That's your own personal preference. And then add I'm going to say not a few. Add 2 books that fit you. Add 2 books to your reading list. Does that sound good? Or your Amazon cart, so you can think about it. You don't have to read them. You don't even have to open them, but putting them there, at least you know they're there. And if something comes up in the future and it's meant to be, then you go read it then. Does that sound like an easy enough task to get people into reading?
Great stuff. And it's been a great conversation, friends.
Alrighty. All right, guys, I'm going to put you backstage. We are going to wrap this show up. I knew it would take too long. Oh, my gosh. We're so far behind. Thank you so much, Samir. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, Brian. And thank you all for watching. Don't forget, Millionaires Are Made. This episode was on intellectual health and books. I got 2 things. First off, I only made 2 resolutions. One of them is going to be read 2 books a month. And since there are 6 aspects of health, I'm going to read 2 books for each aspect throughout this year. If you want to join me, that would be fantastic. And the second thing, my favorite book is a book called Silence. It's kind of like Samir was talking about, a little bit historical about missionaries in Japan and how God can talk to you in ways that you may never see. And I think I see that a lot of days. A lot of people are spiritually lost right now, and they don't see that God is actually talking to them and telling them things through the environment and the earth and Mother Nature. It's a pretty cool book. It's one of my favorites. I actually just ordered it to go reread it again. Whew, we have an awesome daily challenge. So first, think of one of your passions. It's going to take less than 5 minutes each day for you to improve your intellectual health. Then you're going to go find an author or a genre that fits your passion or goes against it if you want some other thoughts in your mind. And ask your friend for a tip on what book to read, and then go add 2 books that fit that passion or against that passion to either your Amazon cart or your list of books to read. So we'll be starting that challenge tomorrow. Hopefully you'll